now on CNN. It started innocently enough, one neighbor looking out for another.
A woman in the neighborhood saw what was going on and mistook it for a crime in progress, calling police, reporting 2 African-American men with backpacks trying to force their way in.
Turns out, one of those African-American men lived in the home, a prominent scholar and a friend of President Obama's. When the cops showed up, the trouble had just begun.
I was continuously telling him to calm down during this whole exchange because I really didn't want this either. I really didn't want to have to take such a drastic action because I knew that it was going to bring a certain amount of attention, unwanted attention on me. Nonetheless, that's how far Professor Gates pushed it and provoked and just wouldn't stop.
What it made me realize was how vulnerable all black men are, how vulnerable all people of color are, and all poor people to capricious forces like a rogue policeman.
One officer supporting Sergeant Crowley said he heard Gates say this.
This is how a black man is treated in America. A white woman calls the police and he gets arrested for breaking into his own home.
The case was basically dropped until this question to the president.
Recently, Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. was arrested at his home in Cambridge. What does that incident say to you, and what does it say about race relations in America?
I don't know, not having been there and not seeing all the facts, what role race played in that. The Cambridge police acted stupidly in arresting somebody when there was already proof that they were in their own home.
From a simple arrest to a presidential smackdown to a defiant police department calling out the commander-in-chief.
As far as the president's comments, the governor's comments, and comments that I did not hear that our mayor made, I think when the time is right, they should make an apology to us. I think the president should make an apology to all law enforcement personnel.
I supported him. I voted for him. I will not again. I agree that I think it's admirable that he would speak on behalf of his friend, but he should have recused himself. He should have stepped back, and he should have said, I support my friend, but I don't have all the facts. I won't weigh in yet.
The president felt the pressure and a need to explain.
The fact that it has garnered so much attention, I think, is a testimony to the fact that these are issues that are still very sensitive here in America. So to the extent that my choice of words didn't illuminate, but rather contributed to more media frenzy, I think that was unfortunate.
He proposes a meeting at the White House. So what happens when the president, the professor, and the police officer sit down? Let's talk right now. And I mean that. Let's talk. We are going to have an open conversation here. I want to introduce you to a few people who are experts on this subject, and we picked them very carefully. Buck Davis is a diversity and inclusion consultant with Global Accent Consulting. Al Vivian is the president and CEO of Basic Diversity. He has provided training to everyone from CEOs to sanitation workers. Both are with me here in Atlanta today. Now I want to introduce you to Ronald Hampton. He is with the National Black Police Association. He is in Washington. And James Andrews is a blogger and a social media expert. He has written about many social issues, especially the present topic. He's going to talk to us about what has been happening on social media about this issue and how we can have a conversation similar to the president, what the president's having with these men online. That's a way to get it to the entire world and do it very quickly. I'm holding this because I'm going to read from, I don't have my computer, so I'll read from Facebook. Okay, so Buck, we'll start with you.
All right.
When this all went down, I would imagine that you saw it coming, and you know from teaching how these things can escalate. Mm-hmm. Why did this escalate? Let me take that back. What's the first thing the president and those gentlemen should do when they sit down and speak?
They should absolutely set some ground rules around how they're going to be with one another, to make sure that they're going to have an open dialogue, that they're going to listen to one another, to make sure that they're gaining each other's perspective. And they sit down and they be open and honest about their true feelings about race and what it feels like to feel like you have been portrayed as racist, and also what it feels like to be portrayed as a thief in your own home.
Okay, what is the biggest stumbling block, and not only in this possible conversation, but in conversations like this that you have? Because I know you have them every day when you teach.
Yeah, the fear for white folk is the fear of looking like a racist. We don't want to have the conversation because we don't want anybody to look at us like we are part of that population who really wants to genuinely oppress a group of people. We don't want to appear like we are racist.
And that's usually and what about for people of color, for, you know, black or brown or Asian people? Is there a big fear there as well?
I think the fear is that they're not going to be heard or listened to, or it may be, here we go again, just have another conversation that won't be valued.
Okay. All right, let's talk to Al. Al, when you're doing this, thank you very much. So when you do this, you talk basic diversity as well. And when he said fear of being a racist, you said, mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Because even when I have these conversations, I have it with friends and people I know. I've had this conversation with Buck Davis. Buck talks to me about diversity and about racial issues all the time, and he's one of the most honest people I know about that. But you can't have those conversations with everyone. I try to have it with people, and they all of a sudden clam up, or they're looking for some sort of agenda behind it when it's just to talk.
Yeah, well, the fact is, you have to find the right way to do it. Buck's correct on setting some ground rules. This is how we're going to talk about it. This is what we're going to do. We can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. You set some ground rules, and then, as Buck said, you got to be very honest. And when you really have created an honest atmosphere, you can get that honest. It may take some time, but once you do, then you got great results. And the reality is, you're not going to get real great results unless you get honest. When everybody's hiding what they think, you don't get to it.
Okay. Hey, I'm going to go to Ronald real quick, and then I'll go to James. I want to ask you this because I should have followed up. I should have been a better questioner. Why are white people afraid of being thought about as racist? Because there are perceptions about African Americans and about black men, but yet and still people will want to talk about it and are open to discussing. Why are white people afraid of being perceived racist? What's the harm in that if it gets you to something else?
Well, I think that we don't want to say anything. For the most part, the people that I come in contact with, they want to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. They don't want to offend other people. They want to share their experience. The trouble is that we fear that if we have the conversation, we may stumble a bit. You see, Don, this is a conversation we have not been taught to have. Mm-hmm. We didn't grow up having the conversation. It's not an easy conversation. There's a lot of history behind it. There's a lot of fear for us because we don't want to look like an offender.
Okay. You said may stumble a bit. Hang on 1 second. All right, so I'm going to go to you, Ron. You know, Ronald Hampton, talking about police. You know, profiling is real. There are people who say this case it wasn't profiling. It was simply, you know, two people who got into an altercation of sorts and things got out of control, but it was not racial profiling. What are your thoughts on that, firstly, before I ask you about what's the solution?
Well, first of all, I think it reflects or mirrors other profiling situations. Profiling can take place in a number of instances. Profiling takes place when you walk in a grocery store and they follow you around. It takes place sometime at the airport. It takes place at...
But in this incident, though, Mr. Hampton, what about in this instance?
Well, it could be perceived as being racial profiling. I think if Mr. Gates had been a white man, it wouldn't have ended or resulted in him getting arrested. It would have been handled altogether different. Because there's an expectation that he lives in that community, and therefore that's his house.
And you have come across that being a black police officer, those sort of expectations about who lives in what neighborhoods and who drives what kinds of cars?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've worked with guys who've drawn conclusions based on those kind of assumptions, and they didn't know anything about the person other than the fact that they happened to be an African-American person.
Okay, stand by. I want to go to James real quick. James, are these conversations happening online now? Has this sparked something? I know that Michael Jackson, the death of Michael Jackson, Iran did. What is this doing online?
I mean, it's showing that, you know, in the online space, that's where the true conversation is happening. If you want to find out the true heartbeat of America, go to the comment section of the Boston Globe under the article about Professor Gates. There are plenty of honest people who are having conversations. We need to bring those things together.
All right. And do you find that is happening online? That's happening in social media now?
It's absolutely happening. It's happening in Twitter. It's happening in Facebook and what we call microblogging. And these conversations are driving. After I leave CNN tonight, it'll happen, you know, online on my blog, on my stream. Right. It's happening all the time. It's now media.
Let's hope it's constructive. But all of you, stick around, because we're going to talk a lot more about this. Our conversation is going to continue. And if you missed even a minute of Black in America, I want to tell you, which talks about these issues, you can watch it in its entirety. Soledad O'Brien hosts Black in America 2 at the top of the hour. We're back moments away with our conversation. Don't go away. All right, right back to our conversation. Not even going to say their names. I want to ask you this because I want to have as much time as possible. This one is from Twitter. Brother Grimace says, talk about predispositions, Don, of mistrust and how to overcome that. Who wants to take that one? You want to take it, Al?
Sure. You only overcome it by having the honest, deep dialogue. You have to get to where people can say what they really think and what they really feel. We've created a PC world where you can't say anything that may be seen as wrong, and if you create that environment, you're never going to get the real honest answer. So the reality is we should be able to say what we think, what we feel. That's how you get to solutions.
And some of the honest answers may actually hurt you. I mean, you may go away from this with some hurt feelings, but you know, hurt feelings often make you grow. Anytime you stretch and grow, it's going to hurt a little bit, whether it's professionally, personally, no matter what it is. I want to go back to James because James, someone said, I don't remember the name of the person who sent it, but whoever you are, you know who you are. They said, sadly, Don, some of the conversations happening online are not so constructive.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a online is a place where people, are saying things that are not positive, are saying things that are, confounded in stuff that doesn't make sense. And that's why we need to use the online space, I think, as social media to bring folks together. I mean, it's a great place to show the divide, the racial divide of how people feel about this subject.
So even if the online conversation, Buck, is not that constructive, right? Does it still need to be seen, or do you still need to have that, or should there be some sort of control or parameters placed on these types of conversations?
Well, I think if the conversation is not constructive, it doesn't need to be happening, because I think people will just bury themselves in stereotyping other people, and you might set us back instead of moving us forward. If it's not constructive, it's not positive, it doesn't need to be happening.
Okay, so Ronald, go ahead, Ronald. I was going to call on you. Go for it.
But what I was going to say is that you have to have the conversation there, and there's going to be negatives. Part of the thing that one of the things that should be happening is not only should the president be having a conversation with Gates and Crowley, he should be having a town hall meeting with people from the criminal justice community, African Americans, other police organizations to talk about this issue. This is a very real issue. For example, Senator Webb, Senator Biden, before he became vice president, proposed legislation to address some of these disparities that's in the criminal justice system. And we keep putting it off because we're concerned about hurting someone's feelings. The fact of the matter is that we need to look at these issues. I agree with the two experts there, but one of the things, I know that they're familiar with some of the work of people like Peggy McIntosh out of the University of Mass, and Dr. Edwin Nichols, who was here in Washington and now at Harvard. And I mean, there's such a thing as white privilege in this country. There's also such a thing is that if you're not working on these issues to get rid of them.
Stand by. I know if you're not working on those issues, because that's really sort of at the bottom of this. And I'll talk to Al. You want to tag up that? I know you want to talk about privilege as well. Oh, go for it. He says if you don't address white privilege, then you're not really addressing the issue at all.
Exactly, and quite often that gets overlooked. The reason why President Obama has had to dial back is because the feeling of, well, it has to be an issue that's talked about, but if he says it, if he brings it up, there's a problem with him bringing the issue up. That's why it was important that somebody asked him the question, and quite honestly, in the black community, what I've heard is everybody saying, yes, I'm so glad he actually addressed the issue.
Right.
He cannot bring it up because he's looked at as if, oh, there you go. See what happens when you let him get in the office. Look what he does.
Look what happens when a black man gets in office. He does that. So let's just say
he use it as a teachable moment to teach.
Right. Okay, so and we got to run. But Buck, I want to say this: white privilege. You have this whole thing on white privilege that I find interesting. You said, and it's on class. It's not. It just happens to be white. It's the same thing with people who have money.
Right.
You're not aware of your privilege because you have it. Talk to us about that.
Well, I think that white privilege has been one of the largest source of frustration for me over the last decade of doing this work, is that white people simply denying that there is no issue. And then you have Barack Obama get into the presidency in the office, and we go, look, we got a black fella here. There is no racism. There's no barrier to these folks. Right. You can rise up and you can achieve what he's achieved. The fact of the matter is that while opportunity exists across America, opportunity does not exist in the same form and fashion for everybody. People of color experience barriers that white people don't experience. Right. Rich people don't have the same experiences. People of different socioeconomic class. Right. Privilege is a concept that I think that should be on the radar screen of all Americans.
Buck, we've got to run. Buck, Al, Ronald, and of course James. Thank you all. We could have this conversation, all day long. And thank you. I'm sorry everybody didn't get in. We're going to try to have it again at 10 o'clock this evening. A lot of these folks are going to join us, so make sure you join us at 10 p.m. Eastern here on CNN. So I want to say this is a sad note. We want to say goodbye to a literary pioneer, a favorite for millions of women. That'll happen next to the newsroom. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.